Welcome back to The Distracted Gardener. I am Charlie, the Distracted Gardener. Last episode, we started talking about the ways the garden can be used to keep us connected to friends and family, whether they just aren't geographically, close to us, or if they've passed on. Today, we're going to continue in that vein, but unlike last week when we focused on flowers, things like marigolds and roses, today we're going to be talking about things on the more edible side of the spectrum. Last week I talked about how my grandmother on my dad's side kept her own garden. Beyond a few flowers, though I don't really remember much about it, what I do remember are the things that she used in her kitchen. Grandma she always had the best food at Christmas time. I remember going there and drinking just so much eggnog and getting in trouble with my grandfather because my grandfather really liked it too, but he would dilute it with milk. But I would just drink it straight, so it would go really quickly, and he'd get upset. And of course, there are other non-Christmassy things that I remember from it too. But one of the things that stands out was actually the humble radish, and radishes were a super common thing to see. I remember she always had them on her salad, and I remember when I was a kid, I don't think I liked them all that much because they tended to be really spicy. But now, I think when I was thinking about things to grow when I first started gardening, radishes were something that came up both in my memory because I remember grandma always had them and I always really liked the color, but also sort of researching, crops for a beginner, that kind of thing. Radishes always popped up, and that proved to be a really good idea to grow them because they're just kind of completely foolproof. Basically, if you plant them and you are careful to make sure they're not so close together, you're good to go. And it's so satisfying to take them out of the soil. Just that kind of, it's almost like a popping that they do. But now that I've gone a little crazy for radishes, I think for memories of my grandmother, again, this is my father's mother, nothing quite beats, in fact. Have you ever had a pickled egg? It's kind of a highly divisive food in my family. My grandmother used to pickle hard-boiled eggs in vinegar with beets. And if that sounds terrible to you, I have to say, just explaining it doesn't sound so great. But it wasn't that they were just in vinegar. They were pickled with vinegar and beets. And the result after you left them for, usually, I don't know, at least 4 days or whatever, but the more you leave them, the better, was a violently magenta egg that it had some like beady, earthy tones, but it had like the punch of the vinegar. But anyway, absolutely delicious. Apparently it's something like my grandmother's family traditionally made, being that I guess there were some roots with like the Pennsylvania Dutch. And for those who are not familiar with the Pennsylvania Dutch, they're a group of German immigrants who came to the States like in the 1700s and the 1800s. I don't know why they're called Pennsylvania Dutch despite being German, but that's where this pickled egg recipe, I guess, originally came from. But for the sake of today's conversation, all you need to know is that they're weirdly delicious and they're crazy addictive. And even living here in Japan, where like not too many of my family members will eat them, they appear in my house 3 to 4 times, and then 3 or 4 times a year before they quickly disappear. The trouble with these pickled eggs is that they require beets. And canned beets, I guess they're easy enough to get from like the import section at my local supermarket, but they're like $4 for a can, or what is equivalent to $4 a can as far as like, how it feels. It's probably like 400 yen, which these days is probably like a quarter in US, but it feels like $4. And yeah, and it's not just the cash, it's also the fact that I'm always looking to use locally grown veg, or at the very least like nationally grown veg, right? It doesn't have to be my backyard, but at the very least I'd like to be from Japan. And so all that being said, I decided to have a go at growing beets myself. And I've actually I think I've tried 2 seasons in a row now, and 2 seasons in a row I have failed so miserably. Usually what ends up happening is the beet itself never sizes up, so I just use the leaves in soups. And here too, as we talked about last week with the rose issue, lack of study and a lack of information is probably to blame, I think. Beets, as it turns out, produce compound seeds. So, like for example, like a marigold, right? When you open up a seed head on a marigold, it breaks into, I don't know, however many single seeds are inside of a seed head. On the other hand, beets are compound seed, which means that like I don't know how many, maybe like 4 or 5 seeds are stuck together into like one large cluster of seeds. So that basically when you plant them, you're not just planting one of them. You're not just going to get one sprout. Potentially you could get like, 3, 4, or 5 sprouts from one of those compound seeds. And I forget the name of a compound seed. It has kind of a cool name, I think, but it's not popping up for me right now. Apparently beets can be grown sort of in clusters like that, and usually what happens is they'll grow together, meaning like in the very close together, and then they'll sort of push each other apart as the the fibrous root kind of bulks up. They'll kind of push each other apart, and they shouldn't have too much trouble growing and sizing up. However, as I said, for 2 seasons I have not gotten any proper beets. Maybe I had like one that was like, it was still like a quarter the size of what a beet should be. But I think my trouble when sowing these seeds is that I didn't really understand this whole compound seed thing until basically I was already fruiting out, or when I should have been fruiting out on the beets this year. And I looked it up and found out about the compound seeds, and I realized that I had planted probably like in one planter bag. I had planted, I'd opened up 5 holes, and I probably put like 2 or 3 seeds in each of the holes, thinking that there would be like 2 or 3 beets that grew in and push each other apart, like we just talked about, so it would be a trouble. But then if we think about like even if there's only 3 seeds per seed cluster, per compound seed, that's 9 seeds per space, right? So then, in other words, if you have like what we said 5 holes, there's 45 plants that pop up in the same plot potentially. And so, as much as you can say like they play well together and they'll grow together even with other beets in a relatively small space, that is just too much. So, I'm a small learner. I'm not a small learner. I'm probably an average sized or a little bit too big learner, I suppose. But, I'm a slow learner is what I wanted to say. And so I'm only going to be able to remedy this in my 3rd attempt at growing beets next year, I think, now that I have the proper information. You only know what you know, as they say. So for now, grandma's pickled eggs will be made with canned imports or with the occasional miracle beet that appears at the local farmer's market or the farmer's market section at the local grocery store. Wish me luck next year. Lastly, I want to talk about Japan's great shame, which is probably overly dramatic, but for the absolute dearth of Mexican food, I gotta say it's a tragedy. It's not that there's no good Mexican places in Japan. I'm sure there actually used to be a place in Echizen City here in Fukui that was run by a Mexican gentleman, and it was so good. It was so good. I think he closed up shop and he's running like a taco truck someplace. But it's sort of like has very like narrow seasons. But anyhow, just about everything. Like if you really want to make decent Mexican food, you can either find it at the grocery store, or you can at least find like some kind of close approximation to substitute something with. For example, like sour cream, you can just get plain Greek yogurt. If you want tortillas, you can go to like Costco, or you can go to Gyom Super, which is kind of like a Japanese Costco. It's like a restaurant supplier kind of thing, but ordinary people can shop there too. So yeah, all of that to say that you can find just about anything you want. But the one thing that's really difficult to find, at least again in my neck of the country, are chili peppers. Hawkskull peppers, takanotsume, are small red chilies that are super easy to find dried. They're used a lot in like for example, my wife's grandmother puts them in like pickled daikon radish, and to give them a little bit of pop, and I guess that's kind of how they're used. They're never used as like, at least in my experience, in the same way like you might use like a jalapeno to like make like a jalapeno popper or something like that. They're never like a main part of the dish, I feel like. So those are easy to find, at least the dried version. But like habaneros or jalapenos, yeah, it's just I've never seen a fresh one sold anywhere. But again, it could just be because we're in the kind of the rural part of the country. And so from the first, jalapenos have been a fixture for me in the garden. There's not been, like I said, I've been growing for 3 seasons now, and every season I've grown them. The first year I made a mistake and I grew only one plant, but I got enough off it to feel like, okay, I can do this. And I was super pumped about it, but that year too, I think I was watching like Pepper Geeks or something like that on YouTube, and they were talking about overwintering it. And so I was like, okay, I'll give that a try. And so I overwintered that plant for the following season. And along with that and one more that I grew during that second season, I was just, oh my God, forget about it. I had frozen peppers, hot sauces, and pickles for months, and I was thrilled. And this last season was kind of okay. I wasn't nearly so happy with it just because I didn't really take care of, excuse me, I didn't take care of the soil so much. And just generally it was kind of an off gardening season this last time around. But I am hopeful about next year because I'm overwintering again this year with a different plant. And also this year, kind of on a related note, I finally picked up a heating mat for seed starting come next month, I guess. Oh, that's crazy. It's already January, isn't it? My end of next month anyhow. So I'm really hopeful about growing jalapenos. That is something, of course, I don't know that it makes me feel any closer to anybody like specific. Like I don't like pop a jalapeno. Pop a jalapeno like it's a drug, but I don't pop a jalapeno and think like, oh my God, grandma, or oh my God, little brother, or something like that. But it's something that just gives me more like a, I don't know, it reminds me of home kind of thing, and I mean, I'm not going to kid myself. I grew up in Buffalo, so I don't know how good the Mexican food was in Buffalo. Well, outside of Buffalo anyway. But I still miss it for sure. And it's all of this to say, both last week's episode and today's episode, it's just something that like you don't really think about too much. Like when you move to another country, like I don't know, I'm almost certain that like when I was like, okay, well I got the job in Japan, I'm going to move to Japan. Like I don't think I ever thought, oh, I'm going to miss this food, or I'm going to miss that particularly flowery spice provided by fresh habaneros that I can get like the Rochester farmers market anytime I want. And on the other hand, it's easy to imagine how much you're going to miss your friends and family as you set off to kind of make a new life for yourself on the other side of the world. And I think it's easy to think of like technological solutions for these kind of heartaches, but like FaceTime is a wonderful thing, and import shops can be really helpful to scratch those itchy taste buds, although they tend to put a big dent in your wallet. And I guess one of the things that was so nice to discover as I'm at the beginning of this whole journey to grow food is that, gardening for memories, for connection, I think it's hard to understand how big of an impact, a positive impact that can have on you until you do it. And, so I guess all that to say, it's done wonders for me. So I hope if you're not already that you'll give it a try. If there's something like you remember your grandma growing, or I don't know, something a friend of yours grew that you always loved, and you can't be near to that friend as much as you'd like anymore, whatever the case may be, that you'll pop whatever that thing is into your own garden. So thanks for listening to today's episode. The Distracted Gardener will be back next Monday. We'll be talking about mail order vegetables and their sustainability. It's something that I've been sort of getting into more recently, but it's something I'm struggling with because of the sustainability aspect of it. And it's something I want to kind of talk about in an open forum like this and hopefully get some feedback on. So I hope you'll listen then. To make sure you don't miss out when it's out, be sure to subscribe to The Distracted Gardener on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to get even more connected, you can check out naturalfukui.com for a variety of different blog posts, or you can follow the show at naturalfukui on both Instagram and Twitter.